Hello, I'm Jeremy Fernandez and welcome to our live stream to answer your questions about the COVID-19 crisis, as we do every week on a Friday afternoon. With social restrictions being lifted, we're finally getting back onto the parks and sporting grounds that for so long have moulded Australians' identity. But even though some professional sport has now resumed this week, there are still a lot of questions about community sport and recreation and the general outdoor activities that bring people together. As we work through sport and exercise-related questions that have been sent in by you over the past couple of weeks, please feel free to leave more questions in the comments sections below and we'll get to as many of those questions as possible. Now, joining us to answer your questions is the broadcaster Tracy Holmes, ABC News Breakfast co-host Paul Kennedy and Maddie Clements, the Director of Athlete Wellbeing and Engagement at the Australian Institute of Sport. Welcome to all of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
now,
Jeremy. Let's begin, Tracy, with the status around the country with sport and a lot of other restrictions at the moment is really quite vast. Some states like WA, Northern Territory, are well into stage 2, being active right now in terms of those restrictions being lifted. Other states still very much in phase 1.
Yeah.
And that applies to sport as well, doesn't it? So we need to sort of preface this conversation by saying there are rules that really govern each state and territory very differently.
Yeah, and I suppose it fits in with everything that we've heard all the way through this COVID-19 period. And that is, you can hear the Prime Minister, you can hear the Chief Medical Officer chat about what they describe as the landscape and what they're hoping people will be able to do as we move from week to week and phase to phase. But then it's up to everybody, according to the state or territory that they live in, to go to the websites of pretty much the health departments in each of those state and territories to tell you exactly where they are at that time and which rules to follow. It can be confusing, but it's actually quite simple if you follow those very basic situations. Go straight to the website of the health department in your state or territory and see where you're at. Now, on top of that, there is also the Sport Australia website, and they're very actively involved right through from elite sport right through to community-based sport, and they've put together, working in conjunction with sports, community sports and others, the Return to Sport Toolkit. And there are basically 4 elements that they suggest everybody should follow. You plan, you prepare, you respond and you recover. And it's a really simple method. You just click on there, have a look, and it'll guide you through the best approach for your return to sport.
There are some really helpful checklists just here, this part of the page, where, you know, it's rules and ideas on how to manage large sporting organisations, smaller community groups, a COVID safety coordinator for each group and how that should work and the things you should sort of think about. And it goes right down to how you should manage your finances as well in terms of anticipating sort of contingencies that might take place. Maddie, this was partly put together by the Australian Institute of Sport along with many sporting groups around the country, and clearly there's a very keen community out there wanting to get back to community sport.
Oh, absolutely, and that's absolutely no different to our elite athletes who want to get back. But it is really important that we follow the rules and the recommendations and guidelines. Sport is a great thing, but it is important that we've got human beings at the forefront, and to follow that expert advice, those guidelines have been produced by experts. Everyone loves sport, but be sensible.
Be sensible. That's a very, very good idea in these times. PK, speaking of being sensible, we've got professional sports starting to go back now, governed by a whole heap of rules. It's taken a lot of negotiation to get to this point, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think the top sports are doing it pretty well. It's been staged bit by bit. They've all got their own challenges, of course, and at the heart of those are financial matters, including broadcasting deals, how it's going to look without revenue and all those sorts of things. So, yeah, I think most of the sports seem to be doing pretty well. The NRL surprised us all by meeting its ambitious aim of getting back by May 28. The AFL, I think, will make its mark on June 11, and the A-League is now trying to prepare to finish off as well. We had the WNBL release its schedule this week. Super Netball is already making plans, and they've even talked to Border Force about getting athletes from overseas to come through, get exemptions, stay in quarantine and play. So I think bit by bit the top end has been really successful in trying to get back. And at community level, one of my great concerns at the start was that these big sports are going to make the decisions for those on the ground, the volunteers who run the community sport, which is something I've been critical in the past about. I don't think that they should be doing all of that, looking after the big business and also community level. But I've found that this time around they have deferred to the experts, as Tracy has said, and to get your information via something like a state-based AFL, that's really coming from the state government and local councils. So I think the information flow has been pretty good. Some leagues, some country leagues particularly, but regional leagues as well, they have canned the prospect of coming back this season. So all of the different leagues and associations and sports are making their own minds up on what is workable for them. And it's all about this winter sporting season. And can you salvage a season and can you get some games in? And some are saying, well, you know what? We're volunteers. It's going to be too hard. We're just going to forget about it for this year. And we're going to look forward to next year.
I cannot tell you how many questions we're getting in right now as we speak and throughout the course of the last few weeks, drawing this comparison, particularly recently, between pubs and clubs and restaurants reopening, but gyms not reopening, swimming pools not reopening, general, kind of dance classes not reopening. Tracy, how do you explain this from a health communication point of view to the community?
I wish I could, because I've been asking the same question for a very long time. And I think a lot of questions way back at the beginning as well, because there was some discussion about whether COVID-19 could exist in salt water or chlorinated water, and therefore should swimming pools be open, and would it be actually a good place to go and get your regular physical exercise? There hasn't been a lot on that, and I think partly that's because this whole COVID-19 disease is so new and there's still so much they don't know about. We're hearing, new things that are being discovered every day, but we're also seeing how that morphs and how it's reacting in different societies every day. We're very, very lucky here in Australia because I think, you only have to look around what's happened in the rest of the planet. We're in a very good position, so you don't want to undo all of that good by suddenly rushing back and saying there's no problem, it's okay. But I think it's a really valid question. It's one that a lot of people have been asking, and we have put it to various health officials, and the same story comes back. It's just that it's a very early thing, and too early to be able to give a definitive answer. Yes, you can go in saltwater pools. Yes, you can go in chlorinated pools and it's fine. Yes, we can go to the gym. So I think everyone's just easing back slowly. And let's hope that's the next cab off the rank.
PK, how do you address that question about how these restrictions are being applied apparently differently to the hospitality sector and to the fitness industry?
Well, I think I see the pubs and clubs as fitting in with governments, state, territory and federal as economic, and so it falls under a different banner, I think. And they're really concerned with people spending money, earning money, and that part of the economy. So in the same way, I think they probably look at something like general exercise, and I'm just guessing on the decision making here, but I'm thinking they think that people can go and exercise. There's no rush to get back to a gym because you can get outside, you can go and walk, you can, I guess you can swim at the beach if you're lucky enough to be in that part of Australia that's okay and it's not too cold. But you can go out there and you can keep fit and generally well without going to a gym. So I'm not surprised that they haven't burst through to reopen gyms. Swimming pools, I'm not so sure about, but I think, you've got the changing areas and all those sorts of things around the pool to deal with. I think the decisions haven't really surprised me along the way. I'm starting to see those dance classes that you mentioned. My wife went and did a Zumba class today, and it was next to the gym on the spot of grass outside the gym, and the instructor was able to have that. So I think bit by bit those outdoor places are taking the place of the indoor gyms. So I don't think there are any lack of places where you can work out and keep fit and keep healthy. But then again, I quit my gym membership years ago and set up a place in the backyard to keep fit because the gym was too expensive for me. So I might be a little bit biased there. Some people are desperate to get back into a gym because they like the companionship as well. So I understand that.
And Maddie, that companionship is critical, just like the exercise is, to what a lot of people are asking about this link between physical exercise, being outdoors, and mental health. You're a psychologist. You must relate to that question on so many levels.
Absolutely, and even at the elite level of sport, that social interaction is a really important factor for people partaking in elite sport, but also wanting to get back into it. And it is very much, it has been about just managing expectations of the athletes. So we've got the different restrictions being lifted, but making sure we do it sensibly, because everyone does want to spend a bit of time with one another. It is different to Skype. Being around people, training with people every day, it's a really important part of these athletes' lives, yeah.
Maddie, professional athletes are among the first being, sort of at the forefront of these restrictions being lifted. How are they feeling about going back to sport and to that sort of close contact sort of environment?
Yeah, to be frank, a bit of a mixed bag. There's obviously many that are absolutely, really excited about getting back out there, doing the thing they love, etc. But not surprisingly, there's some that have a little bit of concern about returning into that. As Tracy mentioned earlier, there is so much we don't know about this virus, so it would be natural for people to be a little bit worried, anxious and stressed about re-entering into those various environments. So we've got a bit of a mixed bag, but definitely I'd say a majority of them are really quite excited to be getting back doing what they love, which is training and competing. So competing might be a little bit further down the track, but definitely excited overall.
I want to pick up a comment here by Kat Spears, who's watching on our Facebook channel, saying outdoor exercise is not necessarily an option for those who are undergoing rehabilitation, which is a really good example of, that some of these rules work well for some people, not others. Good observation there from Kat Spears. Tracy, Maddie mentions, frontline high-performance athletes getting back to work. And then we've got this question from viewers saying, how am I supposed to get my active children to physically distance when contact sports are resuming? There's that sort of, sort of disjuncture, isn't there, between what we're told to do as non-professional athletes versus high-performance athletes and what we're seeing, on TV and in the news.
Yeah, this is something that I've spoken a lot about for many years, and that is we put it all into the same basket. And I think we forget sometimes that what we're talking about at that very elite end of the major professional sports, because we've got the elite end in Olympic sports where a lot of people there don't make very much money at all, and they need to supplement what they earn, the small amount of earnings, by doing other things. But when you're talking about the major football codes, potentially basketball, a couple of others fit into that, cricket as well, you are actually talking about a multi-billion-dollar business here, and it's a little bit separate. And I think this comes back to some of those arguments we have all the time about what is a role model, what isn't a role model. So at that very elite end and the professional end, these people are doing a job, and as a flow-on from that economy of professional sport, there's a lot of other people whose jobs and careers rely on them coming back. So it's almost like it's a different thing. And I think as parents, or as teachers or community leaders, we need to be able to explain that difference sufficiently to kids. And I know kids are being taught this in the playground, how to play games and have fun, but still maintain all the things we've been taught to do. Wash your hands, keep that distance, try not to touch each other. So it's just about explaining that level. And if we're looking for things that we should be doing, it's what our teachers and our parents are telling us in our playgrounds and schools, or community-based sport, which are making adaptations as they begin to come back. And the professional sport is something else, and hopefully one day they can get to that, but they're not there yet, and don't copy what they're doing right now.
It's very much a case of, do as I say, don't do as I do. Maddie.
But I think the other part of that, Tracy, as well is for people to understand that elite sport hasn't just one moment returned directly into doing exactly what they've always done. They're actually following a staged approach to a reboot as well. So it hasn't been one minute there's no training, and then they're straight into 100% back into training. In actual fact, there's a very measured process around returning, and obviously a lot of medical monitoring of those individuals daily to ensure that there's that safety, which I think that doesn't occur in the non-elite population, does it, of sport? So these athletes are being tested daily and having to enter data to ensure that they can even attend the gym, for instance. So that there are lots of variations in there that potentially the Australian community is not across.
PK, one of the issues that's arisen in the last few weeks is about whether sports people in general, and we're talking about community sport here as well as professional sport, should be compelled to get flu vaccinations and download the COVID Safe app. Now, we had one of the Deputy Chief Medical Officers on this program a couple of weeks ago saying they take a very dim view of employers, for instance, compelling employees to get vaccinations, to download the app. But this has certainly been also an issue in sport, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, I guess there were different rules, weren't there, out of the New South Wales and Queensland governments on footballers making it compulsory to get the flu jab, for instance. I think that they're right to follow what, I guess, they have to do what they're told. Their employers will require them to do what they want, but it's just follow the health rules on that. I'm pretty comfortable with how all that comes out. You know, and I think that professional athletes are doing what they can. I'm not even sure how it ended up with the Gold Coast player who was standing by his. I think he ended up having to submit some paperwork so they didn't have to get the flu jab. I had medical people, doctors and physios and the like, contacting me saying that those footballers shouldn't have to take the flu jab if they don't want, because they're not in direct threat of getting the flu. So I don't know, but I think it's all sort of worked out itself in different ways. I don't see that as a big issue. The bigger issue is that general participation thing for me, and just picking up on what was said about the kids. I had a training session with some schoolboys that I trained earlier this week. We did it in a group of 10, and they were absolutely fantastic with what was required of them. I had my temperature taken at the start, so did all the kids. When I called them in to talk to them at one stage, one of them reminded me we're not supposed to have a huddle, so they all spaced out. Not mentally, but physically spaced out, and hopefully some of them. And anyway, we got through training and wiped all the balls down and did our hand sanitizer, and we had a terrific session. And so I think the kids are across it as well. And my under 14 team that I coach, they've all been pretty good as well. They're all reminding each other to keep their distance, and so yeah, I don't see that as a big problem. You know, the flu jab, I'm not sure that that's going to come up and be a big issue anymore. I think they've worked through those issues.
And Maddie, just a quick comment on these questions we're getting about the flu jab and downloading the app. Should they be mandatory?
Oh, look, I'm a psychologist. I'm not a physician. I think what we know about our elite athletes is that they get a lot of really well-informed information from medical experts, and those medical experts give them the information to make a solid decision themselves.
I think the overwhelming piece of advice on that has been that if you're in a group that is going to be, you know, quite delicate around the onset of winter and the flu, you are recommended to get a flu shot. But elite athletes are not within that target group, and, you know, suffer it far less and are much more aware of their body and what their body is going through. And because they are always facilitated, you know, part of their working group is medical experts. They do have the best advice for them. Like Maddie was saying, they're surrounded by the best advice they can get for their specific, talent or sport.
Okay, I want to move on to sport in schools, because obviously schools have been going back across the country over the past couple of weeks, and a number of people have been asking this question about to what degree sport should be part of the curriculum now that schools are back, classrooms are open. This question is from a teacher, a question about playing handball specifically at school. We'd love our kids to still be able to play handball as they transition back to school. Is this a good idea? Should we replicate the NRL and AFL's ball eskies, for example, that they use before they were stopped, a bucket of balls and some sort of detergent-based liquid wash? Tracy, do you have a view on...
I reckon that's a great idea. When I read that question, I thought that's a really good idea, and I bet the kids would love it. You know, not only playing handball, but let's see who can throw or dunk or whatever, get the ball into the esky the fastest or slam it the hardest, you know, to try and incorporate these sorts of ideas into what they're doing and still having that physical activity. And I know for teachers in a classroom, there's nothing better than when the kids have their break to be able to run off, burn off of that energy so that they don't sit in the classroom and space out like some of PK's kids might have been doing or might not have been doing. So I think all of those sorts of things, it's finding creative ways, isn't it, of getting everybody to do the right thing. And I just think that's a brilliant suggestion.
PK, are you seeing some creative ways emerging in terms of school sport?
Yes, well, anything's got to be a bit safer than what our kids were doing in isolation. At one stage, I threw the boxing gloves to them, and they started punching on at the trampoline. So they're back to the grade 2. So the 7-year-old is back to school at the moment. I quizzed him about what he was doing at school. You know, they're all washing their hands really well. I think if we're sending them back into the school environment, then yes, they should have a sporting outlet, and by all accounts they are. They're running around and having fun and still doing PE. Their school sports is a good point to pick up on there. By the way, I think handball's fine. Just wipe down those rubber balls and get a wall, and you've got fun for hours. But the school sports really interesting. If you're in a grade 6 or year 7, so your final years of school, it's going to be really disappointing for you to finally reach that mark where you're the kid who's in with all the seniors, and you've got lots of school sport to look forward to, and you're in the first team, and you know, playing with your friends maybe for the last time. Those competitions have been halted at the moment, so hopefully in terms 3 and 4 that the organisers can bring that back. Cross country is another one that's been canned, I know, in Victoria, but the state schools Victoria is now running something different online where you can go out on your 2 or 3K run, log your time and send it in so that you can do that online. So there are variations to take the sting out of having those competitions cancelled or postponed at the very least. But I know that schools are working really hard in that area to provide those outlets, and yeah, I think as was mentioned, it's absolutely critical that they get that physical outlet. Otherwise, you know, time in the classroom is going to be difficult for the teachers and the kids.
Tracy, we're getting a lot of questions of people who do very particular activities. So if we move on from handball, we've got the people who do ballet, the people who swim, the people who do martial arts, figure skating, ice hockey, saying, what about me? When do I get to go back? And the answer, of course, is we kind of don't really know yet.
Yeah, we don't really know. What you really need to do is get in touch with your local club or local organiser or state body of the sport that you are part of. And I think in all of this, and it comes very much back to the Return to Sport toolkit, if you have a look at that, it just offers really good advice because it suggests ways of, you know, we're all keen to get back and do these things, but we're also concerned about what we're going to meet when we get there. And it's about not just thinking about ourselves, but the other people that are involved as well. And remembering that most sports are run by volunteers. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of Australians who volunteer their time, a lot of grandparents who volunteer their time. Not all of them will be in a hurry to come back. And so not all of the facilities or all of the competitions that we're used to will come back in the same way. Some clubs, unfortunately, and some teams may fold. But the next body up, you know, whether it's your local club or your local association or the state body, will be able to direct you to what is happening when and help you get in touch with like-minded people who are all thinking about themselves and each other to make this a nice transition, a transition that is going to be healthy and suitable for everybody.
PK, as Tracy just noted, and a lot of our viewers are noting as well, there are a lot of groups, businesses that are simply not going to be able to sustain this downturn. Do you see that wave coming, and when will that reach a critical point?
Well, I think we're all going to be seeing that pressure mount in September, perhaps, when the end of the government payments stop and when things change that way. So I think, there will be pressure on local businesses that get around sport. I think, but Tracy makes a great point about pressure on the individuals, and you've got to look after yourselves. You really do. We've got a president at one of our local clubs who's runs a local business. He's had to put off 6 or 7 people. He's under as much stress in his work life as he will ever be, running a club as well and going to meetings with the league. And at some point, as I said to him, you've got to just say, what are we working towards here? Yes, we want to get back and we give the kids somewhere to play and we want to have a competition, but at what point do you say to yourself, well, let's take the stress out of it. Maybe we just train and have some practice matches at some stage. Do we really need a full competition? And that's what some clubs and associations are doing. They're saying it's too hard. Let's not do it this year. And I think that's a very reasonable decision to come to. If you get together with your friends, your local businesses who won't be able to contribute, if whatever your circumstances are, whatever your sport is, if it's too stressful for you to think about returning to sport, organised sport, don't do it. Set up look after your kids, get everyone else to look after their kids, get them out, get them active, get them playing in the park together. They can kick a ball or throw a ball to each other or do whatever they like, have a dance together or go out on the skateboard.
Yeah, or follow.
You don't need to be stressed about it.
Follow the Australian cricketer David Warner on TikTok, because you're talking about your wife, PK, doing a dance class. He's dancing his way through COVID-19 with his family. It's riveting viewing.
I have sampled that online. I prefer Steve Smith's contribution lately. He's been giving batting techniques, which would benefit potentially hundreds of thousands of cricketers all over the world, understanding Steve Smith and his tips for batting. Forget about his cooking tips, but his tips for batting are spot on.
Matty, it's been really interesting seeing how professional sports people are stepping up and trying to sort of play that support role from a mental health point of view in the absence of being able to actually go out and play themselves. I've found that really intriguing, actually.
Absolutely, and I've been really proud and impressed to see elite athletes getting messages out to the community that perhaps we wouldn't usually see from them about healthy eating, hang in there, we're all in this together. I think it's really fantastic to see that other side of our athletes as well. And also, to a point made earlier, see how the athletes, when we were in real strict lockdown, how they were actually training and being creative. They were making choices around home gyms, et cetera, what can I do, rather than so much concern on what I can't do. It's been great.
Matty, as a psychologist, I want to put this question to you from one of our viewers. I have a few friends who have taken isolation very, very seriously, and I fear for their mental health because they've been scathing of people who were less intense and less vigilant, especially those exercising in parks. How would you tackle something like that? I mean, you spoke about dealing with elite athletes, some of whom who do have that anxiety about going back to sport. How do you tackle that?
Well, I think what we will see over the upcoming months, potentially years, is the impact of this period of time on people's mental health, no doubt. And you've seen the federal government invest or make a pledge to invest in that. And a lot of that will be around the isolation people have experienced for a significant period of time, and then and the impact then. But then obviously then there's that flip of potentially people being anxious to return to do anything. So there's a lot of mental health considerations throughout not only the next couple of months, but I think it'll be much longer than that. And to your question, I think it is around understanding everyone copes with these situations, will have coped with this situation very differently based on previous history, whose support systems around them as well. So there is a little bit of giving everyone a bit of space and a bit of slack, for a better word. Give people a break. It's been pretty tough for a lot of people. And I think we need to appreciate that people just can't snap back into how they were immediately, and some people won't snap ever back into how they were. It's about a new way of living.
Tracy, as PK says, people are moving at their own pace very much in this world, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I had an example. I took my mother for a walk along the beach, and she's got quite bad knees, and we were staying apart from each other. And at one point, my mum needed to sit down, and there was a lady that came running along the beach who was really offended that we'd stopped and my mother was sitting, and she said, "You can't do that. If you're sitting down, get home." And I thought, okay, well, we are all in this together, and we're all a little bit different, and you know, we're not all coping with the same strains and the same mechanisms. We can't cope the same mentally or physically, and so we need to be careful about the judgments we make one way or the other. And I think what you said, Jeremy, was right. You know, we all need to cut each other a bit of slack. We all need to recognise that it's a tense situation for everybody, and most people generally are doing the best that they can. You know, everyone can do with a bit of extra help for sure, but let's try and monitor our own anxieties and be aware that other people are suffering anxieties in different ways.
A final question from one of our viewers about what the future looks like, Tracy. You know, we can take care of our diet, we can try to exercise in these times, but once this is all over, this viewer suggests another one of those fitness be in it campaigns, you know, to get people up and moving again. Do you think that would work, and what would that look like?
I actually laughed when I read that question, only because I put that very question to Rob Dalton, who's the acting CEO of Sport Australia at the moment, and we were talking about the toolkit, you know, because there's a lot of people that are thinking, oh, I'm a grandparent, I can't go back. That's not true. Actually, you can if you're involved as a volunteer in community sport. But one of the things I put to him was, I can see this happening. We've become so used to now, the past 2 months, of being locked in a small space and sitting on our chairs and lots of kids doing this. Yeah, exactly. And that I remember that campaign, Life Be It at Norm, getting off his chair. You do not. You're way too young, Jeremy. But yeah, you know, it probably is going to take something like that, and that's not a bad thing.
PK, I have to say, when I read that question, it sort of made me hopeful for the future about this, you know, sort of new wave of people being encouraged to get out, and where being sedentary isn't such a virtue as it is right now.
Yeah, well, go to your local bike shop and try and buy a bike. You won't be able to get one because they're out of stock. People have been rushing out, buying bikes. In the suburb I live in, people have been walking. It's been good for some parents, dads and mums, who spend a lot of time in their car and commuting. They had work from home. They're connecting with their kids in a way that they haven't been able to before. I'm really lucky in a family setup like this, and with lots of friends locally, and we are, you know, we're itching to go and get back in sport and do all those things. I think the big change is that I'll be more selective about that. In a way, I was running the kids around every night of the week, and to hit that pause button has been really helpful for me, and others have said the same. They're going to just pick and choose what we're going to do now. We're going to slow down a little bit, but we're going to really enjoy the time we spend together, and yeah, we're going to get active. I think it's going to be, I think it's a wonderful reset, and I think if we stop stressing so much about you know, being here, there, or everywhere, and just enjoy our sport, I think it's going to be a great thing. And yeah, I reckon it's a wonderful time to stop and say, well, how good's spring going to look when we all get out there and those measures are relaxed a little bit more. Take care, but yeah, I can't wait for spring.
Maddie, I can see professional athletes being at the forefront of that movement when it does begin, and giving it a whole new complexion.
Yeah, I think we've got a really great opportunity in sport, whether it's elite or community, to be creative, innovative, and think a little bit differently about sport. And I think this has highlighted that sport is more than just performance. It's about how you inspire people, social connectedness, and what it means for your mental health. So I think we've got a really great opportunity to do a reset of what it means to this country. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. All right, Maddie Clements, Paul Kennedy, Tracy Holmes, it's been terrific to talk to all of you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for sending us your questions as well. We'll be here doing this live stream to answer your questions every week on a Friday afternoon, so stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.